On the morning of June 28, 1119, a fierce battle took place in the borderlands between the Syrian cities of Aleppo and Ansh. This confrontation occurred during a period of gradual expansion by the Crusaders into the neighboring territories and towns of the east. Little did either side realize at the time, but this battle would come to define the future history of the Crusades. It was a critical turning point where the Franks had the opportunity to become masters of the entire region by conquering Aleppo, the major city, or face the risk of being pushed back to the sea unless they could capture another strategically important city like Damascus or Cairo. However, to the dismay of the Crusaders, the battle did not go in their favor. The brutal fighting on the dusty and sandy field, later known as the Field of Blood due to its ferocity, led to the demise of an entire generation of warriors and the near annihilation of the elite Antiochian army. Among those who fought valiantly on that day was the heavily armored Prince of Ansh, Roger of Salerno, the last Norman leader of the glorious days of Giscard and Bowman. He continued to battle atop a hill, surrounded by loyal Armenian and Frankish knights. However, Roger met his end in the midst of the fighting, struck down by a Turkish saber that pierced his face through his vizier. The once mighty army of Ansh crumbled around him. From that day forward, the Muslim factions in the Levant gained the upper hand, and Ansh, once an independent regional power, was reduced to a vassal of larger kingdoms, alternating between the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Byzantine Empire. Interestingly, the victorious army in this battle was not led by a jihadi or a religious fanatic, as one might expect. Instead, it was led by a steppe warlord named Ilghazi, the grandson of pagan horse warriors from Central Asia. The majority of Ilghazi's men still maintained a pastoralist lifestyle deeply rooted in the nomadic culture of their ancestors. While Ilghazi was a Muslim, his people were recent converts, and many of them still practiced a folk version of Islam interwoven with elements of the Tengriist religion of the steppe. Similar to the Vikings in 10th century England who initially incorporated Jesus into their pantheon of Norse gods, some of Ilghazi's men continued to observe pagan practices, such as burying their leaders with grave goods. Ilghazi himself sought guidance from astrologers and upheld the steppe tradition of executing prisoners by staking them in place and pelting them with arrows. Ilghazi's father, Artok, had served as one of the Seljuk Sultan Alp Arslan's commanders during the initial Seljuk invasions into Syria in the 1060s. At that time, the main objective of the Turkic invasions into the Islamic world was primarily focused on Egypt, which was under the Shiite Fatimid Caliphate. The Fatimids posed a direct opposition to the Abbasid Sunni caliphs in Baghdad. However, by 1096, after the deaths of Malik Shah and his potential heir Tutush, the political situation in Syria had deteriorated into factionalism and infighting among various warlords. Ilghazi formed alliances with Dukak of Damascus and Yargisian of Ansh against Ridwan of Aleppo and his own brother Sokman. Although Ilghazi and Dukak eventually turned against each other, leading to Ilghazi's imprisonment, Ilghazi's ousted brother Sokman took the opportunity to seize Jerusalem. Ilghazi later reclaimed the city, only to have it captured by the Fatimid vizier of Egypt, Al-Afdal Shahanshah, following its fall to the First Crusade. The constant influx of new players seeking to exploit the discord in the region further complicated the dynastic landscape of Syria. In search of a new opportunity, Ilghazi traveled east and established himself in the fertile pasturelands of the Jazira, where his brothers had also settled. He then headed south into the Mesopotamian heartlands to offer his services to Malik Shah's son, Barkiyarak, who often required capable commanders. In Baghdad, Ilghazi faced the animosity of the settled Arab population, who resented their presence and the strained interactions with the nomadic Turkmen warriors. Eventually, widespread civil unrest erupted, and rather than risk a massacre or the loss of his army, Ilghazi chose to withdraw from Iraq. During this period, the war between Barkiyarak and his half-brother Muhammad had taken a turn for the worse, with Muhammad gaining the upper hand. Ilghazi's withdrawal from Iraq may have played a role in Barkiyarak's downfall, as he was left without support when Muhammad seized the Sultanate in 1105. Making a prudent decision, Ilghazi rode back to his family's heartlands in Mardin, situated in the Jazira, an oasis-like region between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Throughout his life, Ilghazi relied on the loyalty and service of the core group of nomadic Turkmen tribes who had served his father and continued to follow him. Ilghazi's military achievements and reputation as a fearsome warrior in Baghdad were remarkable. However, his presence and that of his men were met with disapproval from the settled Arabic population, leading to violent incidents and widespread discontent. Ultimately, Ilghazi's departure from Iraq proved to be a wise decision. As he retreated to Mardin, he left behind a city besieged by civil strife and uprisings from various factions, including the Ismaili Shiites, who were once the dominant religious group before the rise of the Sunni Seljuks. The region had a long history of pastoralist use, stretching back to ancient times with various groups such as the Amorites, Parthians, Mongols, and Timurids. In 1104, Ilghazi returned after the death of his brother, Sokmen, and quickly rose to prominence, defeating the Crusaders in the Battle of Harran. With increased wealth and reputation, Ilghazi established himself as the leader of the Artikut family, although his nephew Ibrahim disputed his succession. By 1108, Ilghazi seized control of Mardin from his nephew and brought other Artikid princes and warlords back in line. Among them was Baulak, who would become one of Ilghazi's most trusted lieutenants and his successor. Ilghazi was known for his survival skills and strategic alliances. He aligned with both Muslims and Christian crusaders whenever it suited him. Like Toghtekin, founder of the Boyad dynasty in Damascus, Ilghazi navigated the complex web of factions in the region, outliving many of his rivals. The Holy Land during the early 12th century was a diverse mix of independent states ruled by various competing powers, including Christians, Muslims, Jews, Zoroastrians, and smaller religious sects. In 1110, Ilghazi's attempts to destabilize the new Sultan Muhammad were halted when a large army led by the Sultan's general arrived in the Jazira, demanding Ilghazi's allegiance for an attack on the Crusader state of Odessa. However, the attack failed, and Ilghazi refused to participate in further defiance of the Sultan's authority. In 1114, the Sultan sent another army, led by warlord Aksonkor, to defeat the Franks and regain control over Syria. This attack also aimed to eliminate Ilghazi. The two Turkic armies engaged in sporadic fighting, but Ilghazi emerged victorious. Instead of enemies, the Seljuk Sultan's actions brought some of the Turks in the region into temporary alliance with the Franks. Ilghazi formed an alliance with the Franks of Ansh, even befriending the city's prince, Roger of Salerno. However, this alliance was short-lived and based on convenience during a time of power politics. The European and Turkic factions had little love for each other. In 1119, Ilghazi decimated the Antiochian army, including his former ally Roger of Salerno. The Franks retaliated by murdering Ilghazi's captive son. Following the death of the Sultan in 1118, Ilghazi turned his attention to his next enemy, the Franks, and defeated them to claim Aleppo. Despite this victory, Ilghazi's indulgence in drinking allowed Baldwin II to come to Ansh's aid, saving the city. Nevertheless, Ilghazi still held a strong position, ruling Aleppo and enjoying its riches. Arab writers portrayed him as a savior of the faith, attracting more jihadis to join his cause. Meanwhile, the Kingdom of Georgia, an independent Christian realm, had been expanding under the leadership of King David. Georgia had resisted the Seljuk invasions by becoming a tributary state, but under King David's rule, it began reclaiming its territories and preventing Turkic grazing on its lands. By the late 1110s, the local Turkmen rulers sought Ilghazi's assistance as their situation became dire. Ilghazi, accompanied by the new Sultan Mahmud, declared a holy war against Georgia in 1121. However, King David had his own plans and deployed Turkic horse archers from the North Caucasus to support his troops. In the Battle of Didgori, the Georgians defeated the Seljuks and Ilghazi, leading to the disintegration of the Seljuk Empire in the region. Ilghazi's story is one of a Turkic warlord who rose to power and challenged the dominant powers of the time. He formed strategic alliances, navigated the complex political landscape, and engaged in both military and diplomatic endeavors. Despite his ultimate defeat, his influence and reputation as a powerful leader remain noteworthy in the history of the region.